How's it look from your end, Jen?
Oh, yep, it looks good. I got the red button on.
Okay, good. In that case, I will call this meeting to order. It's a special meeting of the Old Lyme Affordable Housing Commission. It's Tuesday, March 29th at 10 after 7. My name is Michael Foliano. I'm chairman of the Affordable Housing Commission. We're joined by members Lori Walker, Bill Belluzzi, Jen Miller. We're also joined by Karen Martin from SLR Consulting, who's through Rivercog is helping us with the affordable housing plan we're working on. On behalf of the commission, I'd like to welcome you all who have taken the time to join us this evening to discuss the work in progress on a state mandated affordable housing plan for Old Lyme. I'm gonna start a presentation, and hopefully that won't run for more than 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have an opportunity to take a quick pulse check on what folks are thinking and go to a Q&A session. So let me get the presentation started. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Great, thanks. So at this workshop, after a brief recap, we're actually after the first workshop in February. So this is the second of two workshops for the affordable housing plan for Old Lyme. Again, that's state mandated. And after the first workshop in February, we had shared some data from recent housing studies, including results that demonstrate a significant need for more housing options in Old Lyme, as well as the region, along with examples of affordable housing and some initial thinking about a strategy to meet the needs of the community. At this second workshop, after a brief recap of the first workshop, we'll present a proposed strategy that's intended to meet the state requirement that Old Lyme needs to specify how the municipality, that's us, intends to increase the number of affordable housing developments in the municipality. And that strategy will ultimately form the foundation for the affordable housing plan that will be submitted to the state. And then after the presentation, which I hope won't take much more than 45 minutes, as we did at the last workshop, we're going to hold a quick interactive pulse poll to get your initial reactions on what you've heard, and then have an open Q&A and discussion session to hear your thoughts in more detail. So we will move on from there. Just a quick note about the commission. We were established in 2021 as the successor to the Temporary Affordable Housing Exploratory Committee. We're charged by the local ordinance that set up the commission with planning, coordination, and making recommendations to the town for how to increase affordable housing in Old Lyme. We're expected to serve as center of expertise on policy and practices related to affordable housing. During 2022, our priority is going to be some short-term objectives to take advantage of an opportunity to build a couple of units of affordable housing space on the McCulloch family open space, potentially to submit an ARPA funding proposal for reuse of existing housing, which you'll hear more about during the presentation. In addition, first and foremost, actually, by June 1st, we are charged with submitting a affordable housing plan to the state under the provisions of Connecticut General Statutes 830J. And along the entire path, we're trying to build a knowledge base and a network that helps us serve more as that center of expertise and advisory capacity. Our meetings are held monthly on the third Wednesday of the month at 5 p.m. Generally, we record the meetings even when we're not virtual. We take an audio recording and post those, and everyone from the public is welcome to attend, and there's a URL there. This will all be posted on the Affordable Housing Commission webpage on the town website. So just a little bit more orientation. There are two parallel planning processes going on right now. Most of our discussion will be focusing on the local affordable housing plan for Old Lyme, but there is another plan in progress at the regional level that is addressing general housing needs, not just affordable. The regional plan is covering all 17 municipalities in the lower Connecticut River Valley region. Includes a very broad and useful housing needs assessment that we'll be drawing on for the local plan, as well as general recommendations for regional cooperation and resources. And that's going to be informed by the regional plan of conservation and development. The affordable housing plan for Old Lyme zooms in some. It covers Old Lyme only. It covers only affordable housing and not general housing. It is mandated under Connecticut General Statutes, Section 830J, actually, for submission by June 1st of this year. It's going to be looking at local housing conditions and trends and challenges and making a needs assessment for Old Lyme, and then coming up with a strategy and plan to actually meet that state requirement to specify how we're going to increase affordable housing locally. And that is going to be informed by the local Old Lyme plan of conservation and development. And as I've indicated on this graphic, the two plans are in an ongoing handshake and informing each other. The commission, in contemplating the development and adoption of an affordable housing plan for Old Lyme, came up early on with some guiding principles. And the first one is that the plan needs to be aimed first and foremost to meet the needs of Old Lyme residents, both present and future, in all stages and walks of life. We're aiming to preserve Old Lyme as an essentially small town and embody the well-established community priorities and values that Old Lyme holds. Importantly, we will consider relevant policies and practices, and we will comply with statutory requirements, but we will not be driven by the 10% exemption threshold for Section 830G, which I'll get into a little bit more in a slide or two, or any other arbitrary goals. We really want this plan to be tied to the unique needs of Old Lyme and its residents and its community. And also importantly, we see this as the beginning of a community conversation, not the end. When the plan is ultimately written and adopted, it's really the start of the work and the start of the conversation. Another quick recap on what is affordable housing. The term gets used a lot, but it does have a couple of definitions, actually. There's a general definition of affordable housing as either owner-occupied or rented housing that costs 30% or less of a household's income. Under 830G, it's legally defined in Connecticut as housing that either through a government subsidy or a deed restriction costs no more than 30% of the income for low-income households, and those households are defined as earning 80% or less of the area median income as set by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. And the current area median income for Old Lyme is $88,600. And against that, there are over 900 households in Old Lyme that qualify as low income. If you do the math on that against housing costs that would include mortgage or rent, plus taxes, fees, utilities, and maintenance, the way it comes out is for a household size of one, the maximum annual household income for a household of size of one is $55,950, which results in a maximum monthly housing budget of $1,399. For a household size of four, the maximum annual income is $79,900, and the maximum monthly housing budget comes in just under $2,000 for that household of four. Now, you might be surprised a little bit at the income levels that qualify as low income. And at that level, entry-level salaries in occupations that include professions such as teaching, healthcare, public safety, science, technology, engineering, and math, as well as manufacturing and service industry wages can fall into that low income range. And even so, at that, what may seem to be a relatively high income, about 1 in 4 households today are spending more than 30% of their income on housing, which qualifies those households as being cost burdened by their housing costs. And all of this affordable housing is really differentiated from what's termed market rate housing, which is essentially housing that's just up for sale on the open market. I wanted to say a bit about naturally occurring affordable housing. Now, this is something you're going to see coming up in the discussion and the strategy. So naturally occurring affordable housing is housing that would cost a low-income household less than 30% of their income at current market rates, not necessarily with any subsidy or restriction on it. It typically takes the form of a small starter home or apartment or an accessory dwelling unit that just by dint of its small size is less expensive. This type of affordable housing, different from qualified affordable housing, which is protected, is not protected from increasing sale or rent costs, nor is it reserved for low-income occupants by a deed restriction. So some of the upsides of naturally affordable housing include they're typically less challenged, again, because of their small size, by available land or water or sewer availability that fit in a smaller footprint. They don't require a deed restriction, and deed restrictions can be seen as a potential disincentive for developers. I'll say more about deed restrictions in a bit. And they can actually become qualified by the state if some of these smaller naturally affordable houses or homes are financed by a CHFA or USDA mortgage. So even though they're not protected, they can become qualified by the state in arrears, if not up front. The downside of this is unless those homes are financed by an assisted mortgage, they're not qualified by the state, and they don't contribute to recognized affordable housing in the town. Also, they can be adversely affected by market conditions that cause increases in sale or rent costs, and I'll have actually a case study on that very shortly. Just a quick note about relevant statutes and regulations. The first is one you've probably seen. It's CGS 830G, and the purpose of this legislation, it was passed over 30 years ago, is to set qualification requirements for affordable housing, and that hits three areas. The first is for occupants based on the housing and urban development income limits that we just went through. For housing itself, based on the cost of ownership or rent, plus a deed restriction. And for developments that include at least 30% of the units set aside and restricted as affordable. So you'll be seeing this term deed restricted. And what that means is that the terms of a deed to a property require that either an owner-occupied home is sold to a buyer qualified by income at a qualified affordable house, or a rental unit is rented to a tenant qualified by income at a qualified affordable rent. And the term of a deed restriction under 830G ranges from 10 to 40 years, depending on whether it's a rental unit or a owner-occupied unit. So CGS 830G also defines a process for developers. This is an important part of it, a process for developers to appeal denials of applications for affordable housing projects with the burden of proof on towns. So essentially, if a developer comes in and proposes a development with at least 30% of the units set aside and restricted as affordable, and the town rejects that application, then the developer has a path to appeal that in court. And the burden of proof is on the town to show that there are serious health or safety issues to the public associated with that proposed development. This provision only applies to towns with less than 10% of their housing qualified as affordable. Lyme has under 2%, so we do fall under these provisions. And research has shown that towns lose about 70% of these appeal cases. Another section of 830 is J, and that's what we're talking about tonight. That requires towns to prepare and adopt an affordable housing plan that will specify how we are going to increase the number of affordable housing units in the municipality. The first version is due by June 1st of this year, and updates are required every 5 years. So we are working on the first version of our affordable housing plan. There are other state and federal regulations such as fair housing, the HUD income limits that we talked about, EPA and Connecticut deep regulations. An important takeaway from all this, and this is a popular misconception, is that 10% in A30G is just an exemption threshold for the appeals provisions. It is not a mandate that Old Lyme must create 10% of its housing stock as affordable. So a quick update. When we did our last workshop in February, we had 85 units of qualified affordable housing in Old Lyme. Since then, the most recent data has been published, and unfortunately, we dropped by 2. So that leaves us with a total of 83 units, or 1.65 of the housing stock in town qualified by the state as affordable. That was driven by so that's a net loss of 2, and it was driven by a loss of 6 assisted mortgages, which is an indicator of rising home costs. And it's also, as I was talking about naturally affordable housing before, it's a demonstration of the risk that comes with naturally affordable housing that's not protected by a deed restriction. So if the market rises and a home that was under a CHFA mortgage is sold at a price that goes outside the qualification limit for affordable housing, then that shows and is not subsequently refinanced with a CHFA mortgage, then that shows as a loss of a qualified unit. So that's a risk. But when you think about it, if you go back to our guiding principles, that our plan is going to be first and foremost aimed to meet the needs of the community, and that we are not going to be driven by exemption from A30G, then the benefits clearly outweigh the risks, and the naturally affordable housing that is the subject of this issue has a place in our strategy, and you'll see that coming up. But in any case, we're set back to our 2019 levels, actually, with 83, and it's another demonstration that besides the risk associated and of increasing home costs, but that we have some work to do. Okay, I'm going to shift a bit, and in one page here, I'm going to do a very highly summarized version of many pages of findings from the local and regional reports and a ton of data that's associated with them. And before I start, I just say this is going to be highly summarized with some high-level takeaways, but the more detailed data is going to be made available on our website. And for those of you who are curious about it, I'd encourage you to have a look at the charts and graphs and tables that actually led us to these takeaways. So I'll walk through them as quickly as I can. The first from findings from the particularly the regional study, and this applies to the state too, is the population and job growth across the region in the state are generally stagnant or declining. Our population is aging and is projected to continue to age for the coming decades. I'll note that Old Lyme has the second highest median age in the region, second only to our neighbors to the north in Lyme, and is also among the highest median age in the region, and actually in the state. The third takeaway here is that our economy is and will continue to be increasingly dependent on a workforce made up of smaller households seeking smaller homes and rentals. 70% of the households in Old Lyme right now are 1 to 2 persons, reflecting both empty nesters and a general generational shift towards smaller households. And that is actually fueling part of the next point here, which is that there's a large gap between the number of households that could benefit from affordable housing and the availability of affordable housing. So against that 70% of households that are 1 to 2 persons, 70% of the housing stock in Old Lyme are large 3+ bedroom homes. So there's a mismatch in what we have for housing in Old Lyme and the nature of the households that currently makes up our population, and that is actually projected to make up a larger fraction of our population over time. Against that, development capacity in town is highly limited by both environmental constraints. We sit between the river and the sound. We're an estuary area. We have wetlands and ledge that cover the town. It's already been significantly developed, so there's just not a lot of land available right now to create any form of housing, including affordable. As I just mentioned, development capacity is further limited by the environmental constraints and by a lack of public water and sewer infrastructure, which is limited to just a few areas, mostly in the beach communities and along the shoreline. What this starts to add up to is, as the current population continues to age and either willingly or unwillingly, because of a lack of housing options for seniors, leave the area, it's going to be increasingly difficult to bring new people in to buy the large homes that make up that 70% of our current housing stock. And this may seem at odds with what you're reading about a very hot housing market, but the current market right now is being driven mostly by low inventory. So the high costs are being driven by low supply and by a surge in relocation to more rural areas from urban areas driven by the pandemic, rather than the fundamentals of economic growth. And the long-term forecast for the market remains generally weak after this surge is projected to pass. So where that all brings us is that jobs and housing in the economy are all tightly linked. And if this current trend holds of a stagnant or declining population, aging, the mismatch between household size and the housing stock, it puts the future socioeconomic health of our community at some risk. The good news is that there are opportunities to improve the situation. And since housing is part of the problem, it's going to need to be part of the solution. So summarizing again, a lot of data from the last workshop that is available online. There's a case for more housing options. So if on this graphic you look at the left side, we have the reality that there's over 800 cost burden households, over 900 qualified low-income households. We have the housing needs of essential services and the workforce that we need to support local businesses. And that's juxtaposed against high home prices with a median price of around $400,000 and rising. Excuse me for one sec. There's also very few qualified affordable units. As we see, that's actually shrunk over the last year. And very few rentals and near zero availability of either. We have an increasing demand for smaller homes against a stock that's primarily large, 3-bedroom or more houses. We have an aging population that's projected to continue to age against multi-year waiting lists for senior housing. And then in addition to not meeting the needs of low-income housing, as we said, this is all linked. And this poses a threat to the general economic health of the community. And there are a few options to change course due to the limited capacity for development that we have in town due to those environmental factors and land availability and infrastructure, along with the zoning regulations that favor more of the status quo, which is the large single-family detached homes. And the bottom line there is that Old Lyme needs more housing options, including affordable. And as we've done the research, we found that we are not in the Affordable Housing Commission the first or the only Old Lyme commission to come to this finding. The Planning Commission last year published the most recent 10-year Plan of Conservation and Development and cited that options need to be considered for a quantity and variety of other compatible housing types to meet the needs of various age groups and income levels and family configurations. and that the lack of available housing for young adults is having a negative impact, specifically on the recruitment for volunteer services, which speaks to those essential services and the folks there that need a place to live, ideally in town. The EDC, the Economic Development Commission, also did a study in 2020 and cited evidence that Old Lyme's lack of housing diversity is constraining its growth. So again, reinforcing that takeaway that Old Lyme needs more housing options than the current predominant option, which is those large single-family detached homes. So what are these options that everyone is talking about, and how do we think about them? So on the left here is a couple of groups of the types of housing that could constitute those options for more diverse and accessible housing. The first group there includes smaller homes that could be built at a higher density than the current large single-family detached homes. And those include the duplex, triplex, quadplex, multifamily homes, so small to mid-scale multifamily, and small clusters, potentially of starter homes, again with assisted mortgages. And what these have in common is that they're relatively small. They're scaled to work within the limitations of land, water, and sewer, so that they're more amenable to on-site water supply. They're more likely to be able to find a small parcel of land, and they're also able to work with on-site septic treatment rather than requiring a public sewer. And they tend to be in that naturally affordable class due to a smaller size. So they may or may not need to fall under a deed restriction. And if they're financed through an assisted mortgage for the owner-occupied part, then they could actually contribute to the state-recognized inventory of affordable housing in town. There are also accessory dwelling units, which are also known as in-law apartments. And there's another really attractive option where you take an existing property, potentially a blighted or distressed property, either commercial or residential, and refurbish and repurpose that property as a qualified affordable unit. And these are highly efficient in that they both work within an existing land or infrastructure footprint. So an accessory unit would essentially be either part of an existing structure or built on the same lot as an existing structure. And a reused property would actually completely reuse an existing structure, which makes these very efficient and cost effective, and also environmentally friendly, since they're not a brand new build. They're reusing existing materials. So that's the first group. The second group in blue includes two different options that will actually leverage collaboration and partnership within town government. And they would appear as either an add-on to an economic development project or to an open space acquisition. So the first example there is mixed use, which is a blend of commercial and residential uses. And we've seen that very recently in the proposal coming out of the Halls Road Improvement Committee. And the other is an open space add-on. And we also have an active example of that going on in town, where there were 2 building envelopes reserved as part of the McCulloch family open space acquisition a few years ago. And those parcels were reserved for affordable housing development. So we see these as very good opportunities for partnering within town government. However, either of these would be not available to start on their own, but they would be dependent on a project for an open space acquisition or an economic development project. But we nonetheless see these as very good opportunities and an important piece of the puzzle for our strategy. The third group there in yellow is the most challenging one. And these are the set-aside developments that would come in under A30G, either for a group of single-family units or a larger scale multifamily unit, where at least 30% of the units were set aside for affordable. And in the case of single family developments, they're likely to be challenged by limitations on land. And for the large scale multifamily set asides, they're very likely to be challenged by limitations on water and sewer. And in either case, because of the nature of A30G, if only 30% of the units that are built are affordable, that means that for every 3 affordable units, there are 7 market rate units added, which effectively, if we're thinking about qualifying for exemption on A30G, which, as I said before, and that still holds, is not a priority, but it is a consideration. We're basically taking 3 steps forward and 7 steps back, and as these projects come in, they tend to move the goalpost. So again, we don't see that as a showstopper, but it's something to consider. So these are the options that are on the table. What's not listed on here is the basic market rate, either single family or multi-family development. And because those are not affordable and not intended to be affordable, they will not appear in our strategy. So these are the options that are being considered as components of our strategy. And the strategy is outlined here. So this all comes together in what we're presenting as a proposed 5-point strategy here, which is first, to create opportunities for qualified accessory and middle housing. And this includes those smaller units that I talked about before that are more naturally affordable, that are most likely to fit within the limitations of land and water and sewer, that are most likely to create more affordable than market rate units and actually move us forward in terms of at least the percentage of affordable units in town. Intrinsic to this is enabling some increased density within residential districts and increasing the number of affordable housing within existing neighborhoods. So if, for example, if there was a conversion of an existing home into a duplex, that would work within an existing neighborhood, slightly increase the density, and actually result in more affordable housing within the same footprint very efficiently. The second is to promote starter homes with assisted mortgages. And we've seen firsthand over the last year how smaller homes that are naturally affordable with assisted mortgages can be a risk if you're counting against the A30G qualification. But you said we think the risks outweigh the benefits. I'm sorry, the benefits outweigh the risks. To reverse that, and that these can be an important part of a strategy to actually create more homes that people of limited means can afford to live in, which is really the end game here. The third part is to promote reuse of existing properties as qualified affordable housing, and that could be a town-owned or a bank-owned property that's not being used. That could be refurbished for use as affordable. A distressed or blighted property that might be able to be purchased and repurposed. For those of you who've been around a little while, I think it was back in 2017 or 2018, there was a discussion about blight here. We see a potential coming together of a resolution to some of the blight problems that were articulated then, with the need for additional affordable housing. And again, this could take the form of commercial or residential properties. In the case of commercial, potentially to result in mixed use property. And we showed a case study at the last workshop about Spencer's Corners in Essex, where there was a distressed commercial property that was converted into mixed use, including 17 units of affordable housing that came out very well. We had mentioned in the last slide about opportunities to collaborate in partnership with the EDC and open space commissions to add on to mixed use or open space add-ons. This may not be a game changer, but one of the aspects of the strategy is that no one element of it is going to solve the problem. We're thinking that working together, if we approach all of these elements of the strategy, that we can actually make some progress, and that's the key. But this fourth item here is to continue to seek opportunities for more mixed use or open space add-ons in partnership with the EDC and open space commissions going forward. And the fifth point, recognizing that the set-aside developments are going to be challenged to work within the limits on land and water and sewer, and that they're also going to be challenged to create enough affordable units so that we're not taking 3 steps forward and 7 steps back. But nonetheless, we all think that this is not something we would write off, but we would select and support opportunities for these larger scale set aside affordable developments, whether they were single family or more or larger scale multifamily under a 30G that can solve those land and water and sewer needs, and that can be planned to add a minimum number of market rate units along with the affordable. So again, none of these would stand alone, but together in concert and in combinations could be a formula for making progress against the need for more affordable housing in town. So what will this take to implement? There are a couple of areas we're going to need to work on in order to create an environment that's more conducive to affordable housing development. The first is to continue some work that's already started and that I would editorialize is I think going really well, which is a network of partnerships and resources within the old Lyme community, starting with forums like this and including ongoing outreach as we go forward, and within town government. The Affordable Housing Commission and the Open Space Commission are already working together to try and create a couple of units of affordable housing on the McCulloch family open space. Just about 10 days ago, there was a first cross-commission forum that was sponsored by the Economic Development Commission. And that has an agenda going forward and will likely have continued opportunities for a forum of all of the commissions in town and present a basis for partnership. Partnership happens at the regional level. We have an ongoing partnership right now with RiverCog and opportunities to work with neighboring towns to either work on mutual support, to actually sponsor projects together. There's a lot of opportunities to work with across the region and across neighboring towns. With funding agencies, there is money available to fund affordable housing. And this will need to be a concerted effort to identify those opportunities and systematically approach them and maintain our awareness of them and apply for them. There are also a lot of, not a lot, but there are some very effective not-for-profit organizations. I would cite the Habitat for Humanity and the Hope Partnership, which are both local in Eastern Connecticut, and the River, who have as their business, not-for-profit business, the funding and creation of affordable housing, and also with private developers who are an important part of the network that we'll need to create more affordable housing. So that's the network of partnership and resources. We had mentioned before that zoning regulations right now, and it's actually the purpose of zoning regulations is to have predictable development in town and maintain a status quo. But in fact, what we're seeing is that the requirements for housing are starting to drift away from the current zoning regulations. So there will need to be, in order to, not just for affordable housing, but to meet the needs of the market as it's evolving and will continue to evolve, there will need to be some discussion about changes to zoning regulations. And that would include things like removing the special use restrictions on accessory dwelling units, which right now are a special use requiring hearing and some hurdles to create essentially an in-law apartment within an existing unit. We need to discuss that, and we will going forward. Expand the allowed use of multifamily and clusters for affordable housing. Right now, there's a very small fraction of the zoning districts in town allow multifamily housing. And a lot of that may contemplate larger scale, but if you think about a duplex or a triplex, we're going to need to expand the allowed use of at least small to mid-scale multifamily. Third point here, there are opportunities for incentive and opportunity overlay zoning districts that could actually attract development of affordable housing in specific areas that were amenable to it. And this is an area for discussion as well. There are also other towns have adopted inclusionary zoning regulations. And what those look like is having a zoning regulation that says for every development, a fixed, typically small fraction, maybe 10% of the homes that are built in a development need to be qualified affordable. That's one form it takes. Another is that for those developments as well, there would be some set aside of funds contributed to an affordable housing fund. Now, this may be a tool we want to consider using. We need to think about that against the backdrop that there's not much room for development left in town. So this may or may not be something that would be a meaningful contributor. But again, we want to leave no stone unturned in looking for opportunities to make progress in this area. So it's a discussion we'll need to have. I'll add here, particularly in the context of proposed zoning regulations, we don't, for this plan that's going to be adopted by June 1st, we will not be coming out with a very detailed list of proposed zoning regulations. Instead, we anticipate that there will be a recommendation to have an extended conversation with the Zoning Commission and other stakeholders about where the most impactful and usable areas of zoning would be, and have a conversation about what areas we want to focus on, and then come up with more concrete proposals for the regulatory changes and go through the process for that. But we see this as the start of an extended conversation rather than the end of one in particular. The third area for what it will take is promotion and incentive programs. So this could include things like the smaller homes and assisted mortgages, those naturally affordable houses, potential programs to generate adaptive reuse, that the reuse of existing properties and refurbishing as affordable housing. And finally, we've talked about rentals. Rentals are a big gap. It's anticipated that based on shifting demographics, smaller household sizes, and the nature of the workforce, that we're going to have a real shortage of rentals. We have it now. That's reflected in essentially zero availability for any form of rental, much less affordable. But there may need to be some kind of promotion or incentive in order to increase the fraction of rentals in town. So these are the kind of changes to the environment that we're looking at in order to put us in a position to execute the strategy we're proposing. I want to say a bit about goals. The state statute that mandates that we adopt an affordable housing plan doesn't say much about either the plan itself or nor does it require that any specific goals are set, only that we specify how we intend to increase the amount of affordable housing in town. Now, some towns have already published and adopted their plans and submitted them. And for a few of them, at least, that are similar to Old Lyme and have very low percentages of affordable housing, they've set aspirational goals. So if it's a town that has, say, 2% like Old Lyme does, they're setting more aspirational goals to achieve something more like 5% as a target. So what we're going to propose is that we be more data-driven and base goals not just on where we are today, but on the need for the future, taking into consideration the reality of how much additional development is actually possible in town. And to do that, we've commissioned a development capacity analysis that's in progress right now. We've done that through SLR Consulting and Rivercog, who we're partnering with. And that's a work in progress. And what the initial results show is that they basically confirm that development capacity will be a limiting factor, but there's still some more work to do to get that more precise estimate of not exactly, but an estimate of roughly how many more units of housing remains to be developed in Old Lyme, considering the environmental factors, infrastructure, zoning, and all the existing development that's already in town, to sort out how much space is available for more development, for new development in Old Lyme. So our overall intent here is to make sure that the goals, again, consistent with our principles, are targeted to meet the needs of the community into the future, that they're sensible and realistic and achievable, such that when we have this goal, we'll be able to come up with a plan to achieve the goal and measure our progress against it, and not just have it be aspirational. And as I mentioned, to base it on capacity as well as demand. And we have a reasonable sense of demand right now. We understand that we have those 800 plus cost burden households, 900 plus qualified low income households. We have access to a lot of data from the regional and local housing studies, and the 2020 census results are emerging along with refreshed demographic trends that are all giving us a reasonable picture of what the demand is. We will need to add that capacity analysis in order to come up with those more data-driven and quantitative goals that we expect and want to have be part of our plan. And once again, if we're able to do that by June 1st, and have relative confidence that the goals that we propose will be achievable, we'll do that. If we're not ready at that point, then we'll leave a placeholder in the plan to complete the capacity analysis and do the research we need to set those kinds of realistic and achievable goals. So I'm going to summarize at this point where we've been. Again, I've gone through some hyper summarization of the housing studies, and there's a lot of underlying data. I'd encourage those that are interested to look at the more detailed materials that are going to be available on the Affordable Housing Commission page on the town website, and the URLs will be in this pack. Our current reality is that we have a significant housing gap, not just between affordable housing and the number of people that the available affordable housing and the number of people that could benefit from it, but in market rate housing and the types of households that are going to be likely to be looking at Old Lyme and wanting to live here. And that gap, based on the demographic projections and the economic projections, is likely to become larger. We have significant barriers taking the form of the availability of buildable land and the availability of water and public water and sewer infrastructure. However, against that backdrop, there are encouraging opportunities, and we've tried to capture those in that strategy for more small to middle housing that is scaled to work within those limitations and to be naturally affordable. So we think there are opportunities. And that gives us the basis to make progress, which is to create more housing options, including affordable, to meet the current needs, which are real today and right now and right here in Old Lyme, as well as the future needs that are seen to increase, likely to increase, and specifically in increasing the availability of smaller homes for those smaller households that we expect to become even more dominant, 70% now, and the rentals that are seen to be a bigger part of the market going forward. We make progress by focusing on efficient development that's scaled to work within the limitations instead of working against them. And again, this would take the form of those small to mid-scale multifamily and multiplex clusters and the starter homes, the in-law apartments, reusing existing properties, and the add-ons to open space and EDC projects. As we mentioned, creating the environment for success with policy and regulatory changes, both at the local and state levels, to lower the barriers for affordable housing, potentially to add incentives to attract developers and create a more conducive environment. And also recognizing that state policy and statutes don't adequately recognize the unique challenges experienced by small towns like Old Lyme with those environmental considerations, with limited capacity for more development. So a legislative agenda will need to be part of this as well. And very importantly, partnering. We can't go it alone. Partnering with the funding organizations, with the developers, with the community, within our town government, and across the region to create opportunities actively instead of passively waiting for 830G applications that could come in that have a relatively small fraction of affordable housing as part of them. So being activist rather than passive and emphasizing partnering across all the potential contributors to increasing the amount of affordable housing in town. So I will stop there and for now, and I'm going to turn this over to Karen Martin, who has joined us from SLR.
Okay, hi everyone. So we are going to do a quick pulse poll that Michael had described at the beginning. So first I'm going to just try to make sure I can share my screen here.
Got it, Karen.
You've got it?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so we're just going to start from here. Okay, so we just have a few quick questions that we're going to ask, but we're going to use some interactive polling software that we have. And what it requires is that you, it will be most helpful if you can pull it up on your smartphone or a tablet, or if you are on a laptop and you would like to open a second browser window, as long as you open a second window and don't lose the WebEx presentation, but are able to toggle between both separately. So absolutely anything that allows you to just be accessing something from a second device or window. And you want to visit this URL that's up here on the screen, which is pollev.com/SLR 2021. And if you go to that URL, you should see to start, there is either a black screen or the question might pop up. And I'm just going to pause for a few seconds, allowing people just a quick chance to get situated. Okay. Hopefully everyone is able to access it. So we're just going to launch into a few of the questions that the committee had pulled together that just kind of wrap up and get your thoughts and opinions on some of the content that you just heard Michael present.
Could you spell POLLEV, please?
Yep, so it's just POLLEV.com.
Huh, no, it's not working for me. All right, sorry, go ahead. It's just not working for me.
That's Easy Victor, Poll, Easy Victor, V is in Victor, not Z.
.com.
Thank you.
/SLR 2021.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, so the first question was, as Michael had presented, this was the second affordable housing workshop that Old Lyme was hosting. The first community workshop was held on February 15th, and we're just curious to know if you had also attended the workshop that took place on February 15th. So are you participating tonight as the second grouping in this series? Did you also participate and hear the previous discussion on the 15th of February?
How about if you heard but did it later?
Looks like about almost 2/3 of people had also participated in February. Some people are here for the first time this evening. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to the second question. So after hearing the material that was just presented this evening, a lot of the background material was covered. Even if you hadn't heard it at the first workshop in February, Michael was able to explain a lot of it again this evening. That kind of laid the framework and foundation for understanding a lot of the affordable housing needs and also the affordable housing concepts as they relate to Old Lyme. Do you feel that after hearing the presentation, either last time or in combination with this evening, do you have a better understanding of what affordable housing is? So it looks like everyone agrees that they do have a better understanding of what affordable housing is. So that's excellent. Great to hear. And obviously, definitely part of the aim of presenting all of this information to all of you. So that's excellent. I will move on to the next question. So Old Lyme needs more housing options, as Michael just described, including affordable housing options to meet the needs of seniors, smaller households, and those of limited means and income. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Or perhaps you're still unsure. How do you feel about that statement? So a large percentage, about 88% of people do agree with that statement. And 13% of people say that they might still be unsure. Nobody is in complete disagreement with that statement. So that's definitely good to know. I'll move on to the next one. So again, another statement based on a lot of the information that you were just provided with, based on the strategy and the framework of the strategy that Michael presented. The proposed strategy to increase the availability of affordable housing in Old Lyme is on the right track. So how do you feel about the outline of the strategy that was just presented? Looks like everybody agrees that the strategy as proposed does appear to be on the right track. So that's definitely very helpful feedback. We are, Michael, the committee and our team at SLR and RiverCog are, working to, continue to refine this based on your feedback so that we feel comfortable that the strategy, the framework that go into the 8-30J plan to be adopted will be on track and have the support of Old Lyme residents. So that's very good to know. And then I think the next one is the last one. Are you interested in helping to implement the affordable housing plan for Old Lyme? So once the plan does get adopted, that's really just part of the beginning of the process. There's then an implementation piece that will involve a lot of, moving parts, participation, and looking and analyzing a lot of things. And there will be lots of volunteer opportunities and ways to get involved throughout the town. So do you feel that you might be interested in participating in that process? So looks like everyone says that they would potentially be interested in helping to implement the process. So that's definitely helpful. And I'm sure the Affordable Housing Committee is definitely happy to hear that. So thank you all very much for participating in the questions. These results are very useful, and we're able to save the results of the polls and use them as our team, the Affordable Housing Committee, Old Lyme, and our teams at SLR and RiverCog are moving forward. We definitely look closely at these results and how we will apply them to our next steps moving forward. So thank you for everyone who participated in the polling questions. I will stop sharing my screen, and Michael probably just has some wrap up or final words.
Which I do, and I'll.
There we go.
Okay, I'm going to go back to just another page or two. There's so many clicks to get a Get a page up here. Okay. Can everyone see the next steps page?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. Okay, next steps. Thanks everybody for the responses to the survey. I think I can speak for the commission saying they were very encouraging, particularly that last one where looks like we're going to be able to tap the community for some help in actually making this real. As Karen said, adopting the plan is just the very beginning of this. The real work starts when we actually go to implement the plan over the coming years. So, and thank you again for participating in that and for the support. Okay, going forward, we still have a lot of work to do over the next several weeks to move this plan to adoption. First is, as I mentioned, is to complete the development capacity analysis so that we have a better sense of the reality of just how much capacity for new housing is left in Old Lyme, considering all the constraints on land and the environmental constraints. And that will be an important component of the plan. Bringing that into finalizing the plan and the goals. Looking at the schedule, the next regular meeting of the Affordable Housing Commission is set for April 20th, 2022 at 5 p.m. We're going to structure that with public comment first. By then, we anticipate that the plan will have been written, even if it's not fully formatted into its printable version. We'll at least be able to put a complete version of it up online for viewing in advance of April 20th. And we'll have public comment first so that there'll be another opportunity for the community to provide input on the plan at that point. And during that meeting, the commission, after the public comment, will take up adoption of the plan. And depending on what we hear during the public comment, we may move forward at that point to, at least within the commission, adopt the plan, or we may defer adopting the plan and leave time for another cycle of revisions to the plan based on the public comment before it's adopted by the commission, which we would then have to do at a special meeting, and then forward the adopted plan to the Board of Selectmen by early May at the latest, aiming for the Board of Selectmen to be able to have a look at it and meet the deadline for submitting the adopted plan to the state by June 1st of 2022. So that's looking at the next 2 months or so. I'd encourage everybody to visit the websites where a lot of the data and the underlying, as I said, if you like tables and charts and graphs, you're in luck. There's plenty of them going to be published on these two websites, the Affordable Housing Commission website and the RiverCog Regional Housing Plan website. The URLs are there. And you're always, in addition to showing up at an Affordable Housing Commission meeting, at our regular meetings, we have public comment routinely on the agenda. For special meetings, sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, depending on what the special meeting is convened for. But at least at the monthly regular meetings, there'll be an opportunity for public comment. And also on the commission webpage, there's a form there where you can just send an email to us anytime, and we'll receive it, and you can expect a prompt reply. So those are the next steps. At this point, we're going to open up for discussion and questions and answers. We don't have a huge number of people on tonight, but for those of you connecting by computer, you can post your question or comment as a chat message. You can see the chat box on the lower right of your screen. You can open that and just type a question, or use the raise hand function on your screen, depending on whether you're coming in through a browser or in through a native app. It'll be in different places, but there should be a raise hand function somewhere on your screen. And if you do that and you'd like to speak, I'll recognize you. Please do stay muted until you're recognized, so we avoid a lot of background information. We do have some folks joining via the telephone. And I will pause occasionally to take questions. I'll have to just open up the lines at that point and let people jump in from the telephone, but I'll bounce back and forth between the folks that have connected online, along with those who have joined by telephone. So if you have something you'd like to hear more about, you'd like more information on, if you have a suggestion for us of any time, if you have any ideas on what a good location for affordable housing might be in town, we're interested in hearing ideas on that. Or if you have ideas on ways to attract developers to create more affordable housing options, or any housing options in town might be, we're interested in hearing those, or any other ideas you have. So this is the open part of open Q&A is real. And so with that, I will thank you for joining tonight, and I will stop the presentation.
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Hello?
and if you could state your
Yeah,
name.
my name is Olaf Bertram Motnagel. I live on Gene Drive, 3 Gene Drive.
Hi, Olaf.
How you doing? Thank you for your work. Thank all of you for your work. I was curious, maybe I missed it, but I understand that the accessory dwellings don't qualify towards the state 10%. Is there a possibility of putting some sort of deed restriction on such accessory dwellings that would make them qualify?
Yes, there are. There are. So deed restriction is actually the primary way. Actually, there's 3 ways that a dwelling can qualify as affordable and be counted by the state. So that means not only are they affordable on the basis of consuming 30% or less of a low-income household's income, but they're actually recognized by the state as doing, and by the state as doing so, and that they are protected. So one way is through rent subsidy. The other way is through an assisted mortgage. That would be the CHFA or USDA mortgage. And the third way is the deed restriction that actually puts between a 10 to 40 year restriction in the deed that reserves the unit for sale or rent. In the case of an ADU, it would be most likely rent, to an occupant that's qualified by income at a rent or a sale price that is also qualified.
Thank you.
This is Jen. Just to make it more tangible, I think so. For instance, if you were to propose to have an ADU on your location and you would like it to qualify for a rent subsidy, you would just need to understand those qualifications and then promote it and register it as such. I don't think there's not like a formal procedure. If I'm wrong, Michael, let me know, but I don't think there's a formal procedure to actually go through hoops to register the ADU as affordable versus market rate. It's just that the rent subsidy level has to be met.
The hoop is the deed restriction.
For a limited time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it could be a limited time for the caller. It doesn't have to be forever. It could be for I believe the minimum term is a year.
It's up to, I think, 10 to 40 in the most recent legislation.
10 to 40 months.
No, 10 to 40 years. They raised it in the.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. My bad.
That's my understanding anyway, but it's a moving target, as we all know.
Yeah, makes it more difficult.
Thanks, Olaf. Good question.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, so maybe it was just really clear, or I put everybody to sleep.
It was super clear.
Thank you and good night.
Thanks, Olaf.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, then I'll thank everybody for joining. And again, if something comes up after, and then thanks. I've seen some of my our partners from RiverCog have been able to join us tonight, and thank you folks for joining. If questions come up, you can come to a meeting or use that link for sending us an email, and we'll be happy to respond. But again, thanks everybody for joining, and this won't be the last conversation we have about this.
Michael, can you hear me?
I can.
This is Anthony Vasilio. I just want to say good evening. I signed on at 7, so I did listen to the presentation. Very nice, and I just want to acknowledge that I was on the call.
Thanks, Anthony.
You're welcome, sir.
Glad you were able to join us.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. Okay, so for the folks from the commission that are online, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Jen?
Ed Miller.
Bill Belusi, second. Any discussion? Since there are a lot of people on, Bill? In favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jen? Yes. Lori?
I see.
I see Karen, you're on. I'll vote in favor, and that seals it. Meeting's adjourned. I'm going to stop the recording, and once again, thanks everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
Good job, Michael. Lori, you still there?
Yes.
If you get a chance, would you just, I don't know if I was clear to take